He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is the Alex Marlow Show.
All right, Hawaiian Shirt Friday edition of the Alex Marlow Show. It's going to be a good one today. Piping hot news day, so much so that I'm kind of getting off to a little late start recording. But that means you'll have a fresh show, hot like the besthotgrill.com. I will tell you, it is Hawaiian Shirt Friday, as you can see. And you guys know my favorite weekend activity, aside from T-ball. Heading into T-ball opening day tomorrow. It's going to be pretty sweet. But my favorite thing to do is to go out my backyard and to grill. And it is Lent, which means on Lent Fridays, I do not have an option of grilling meat. I can grill the fish. Insulator's fine for that. It's good for that. But I would rather throw the burgers up there or the steak. Or, you know what I really am in the mood for? One of those bone-in pork chops. You see those some places. Those look good. I haven't done one of those in a while. But it is a real frustration. I was trying to think of how I could soothe myself because I had a long work day today. And this morning I was thinking, what do I have to look forward to? And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a hamburger for lunch. And then I thought, I'm not going to be having a hamburger at all today. I don't have big lunches, so that'd be a huge treat to have a hamburger lunch. But I'll tell you, if I was planning on having one, I would have got the meat, would have gone outside, got my besthotgrill.com, heats up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes, and high quality, made in America, stainless steel. You got the try before you buy options over there. It's just such good people, made in America products, Cellular infrared grills. You know I love it. I use it at least once a week, probably more like twice a week these days. So it's as easy of an endorsement as it gets. Besthotgrill.com for that. It is the fallout of the Liberation Day, and we'll start with some great news. Jobs crushing expectations. Jobs report came out, 228,000 added in March. Trump economy is defying critics. We were told that this could be the last great jobs report we might ever see, but that just looks more like Trump derangement syndrome projection. There's no sign that the labor market slumped at all. And there are people who are saying not only has it slumped because of Trump, but there's actually no sign of slumpage at this point. And keep in mind, we were losing a lot of government jobs because of DOGE. DOGE continues to slash, hack away jobs. There's new announcements of parts of the government that are getting hacked apart by the day, which is terrific. And still, we're seeing massive levels of jobs growth. So this is, private sector stuff. So that's very good. But it is really, really nice to see these types of numbers posted, because it's very encouraging, because we got a lot of headwinds in terms of messaging at the moment. But the analysts miss this. This is going to be a theme. The analysts miss this. And this is one thing that's going on if you're online, if you follow anyone who's in the National Review side of the economic pontification framework, anyone who's on the left, anyone who hates Trump, everyone's giving you the same stuff, which is that tariffs are not going to work. But remember, all these people have been wrong so often, and so many of them predicted we would have a very lame jobs month. Expectations at 140,000 jobs. Trump beat that by 88,000 jobs in this. So off to a good start. We'll see how it goes next week. But the Trump derangement syndrome crowd continues to underestimate the strength of this economy. So look for any spin, but there's almost no way to spin this one. This is just a 360 win, and it's great news. Okay, so now we get on the mixed bag. So we've got the attack on the global order on trade taking place. Over at the Breitbart Fight Club today, I go through some of the reactions from around the world, particularly in Europe. The German chancellor has warned that Trump's tariffs are fundamentally wrong. All these globalists, all these people who've been getting a better deal from us on trade. I go through some of this data with Oliver Lane at our Breitbart Fight Club, but he points out just how much more we import how much more, for example, we import European autos over American autos. It's like, 5-6 to 1, that sort of stuff. It is the tariff rate that we have, that they put on us is so much higher than the rate we put on them in so many types of goods. And, there's thousands of different tariff rates based for when you're trading with two mega economic powers like the United States and the European Union. The European Union only one is taken collectively. Individually, most of the states are not as powerful these days. But if you look at it, just massive levels of imbalance. And sometimes the imbalance is okay, but it is just not necessary for it to be at the rate that it is. In considering essentially what the EU is these nations collectively bargaining against the United States on trade. Not to mention they left themselves way too vulnerable to China, way too vulnerable to Russia, all things that Trump, who really wants global peace also, which is an underlying characteristic of this trade war that we're in, or that we're entering, is that he also wants to shore up American sovereignty, American national security. And I think send a message to people that you guys are just way too subservient to China. There's so many Chinese tributary states. Belt and Road is going to play a big role in some of these discussions as we go on. So anyway, Germany not happy. Trade war breaking out between China. Trump eliminated China and Hong Kong trade exemptions to combat illicit substance imports. So China not happy with substances coming in from Hong Kong and China. And so there were going to be some exemptions, and Trump just said, no, those are not going to happen. But the U.S. opioid crisis, which really does originate in China, if China is a huge part of that supply chain, a lot of the opioids are either manufactured there or ingredients are used when they're manufactured south of our border. And Trump was going to have a duty-free minimus, which means shipments can enter the U.S. for free of import duties or taxes so long as they're valued at $800 or less, which is a lot of the items that would come over. And he's shutting that down. So China has retaliated, and they are now basically they're pushing back on Trump, and they want to have a big they want to have a big response to Trump new tariffs that he's putting on. So we're going to see a lot of back and forth going on. Trump is truth bombing very stern warnings to China that you do not want to trade more with me. And we'll see. There's going to be a couple of alphas in the room on this, but I've got some progress to report. Trump says Vietnam has offered to cut tariffs on America to zero. To zero. You know how big of a deal this is? Vietnam was one of the ones on Trump's chart from earlier this week, a 90% tariff on Americans. And now we're talking about putting it all the way down to zero. So he said he just had a productive call with the general secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam. He told them Vietnam wants to cut their tariff down to zero if they're able to make an agreement with the U.S. And I thanked him on behalf of the country. So it's a monster win. And we're all moving so fast. We're going to blow through all this really fast because there's big stuff going on. Not all of it's positive, but just note that Vietnam, we had a ton of our goods, a ton of our products, particularly manufacturing of clothing, apparel, stuff goes through there. Those of you who are Nike fans, this is the whole thing, is that there's something in it for everyone here. I know the left is mad at Trump, but the left likes Nike, and Nike stocks going up today. Why? Because they do a lot of their manufacturing in Vietnam. A lot of it, I think, has supply chain that starts with Uyghur slave labor, which I don't like. I don't buy Nike, and I don't think you should either. But just know that if you're a lefty, he's even giving you some stuff to enjoy. All right, General Motors is going to expand production at Indiana plant thanks to Trump's auto tariffs. So this is another one where even American cars were starting to make them overseas. Like people were making them, or at least in Mexico, just starting to build plants outside of America. And then they weren't all making them in Detroit. I don't know if you guys have been to Detroit lately, but it's not exactly a booming economy over there. And United Auto Workers President Sean Fain is saying he's applauding Trump's decision on trade. Remember that guy? Who's the guy? I should have played a clip of this. It's been such a busy week and all these guests and stuff, but I should have played the clip of the Trump at the trade day when he's making his announcement. He doesn't bring up, CEOs in a suit and tie. He brings up guys in a hard hat from the auto workers who are excited about these factories coming back. And this is one thing that I want everyone to keep in mind when you're seeing anyone who wears a suit and tie to work and talks on television or tweets online or has a bunch of money that they move around in the stock market. I'm not dismissing those people as irrelevant. Those people are an important part of our economy. But just remember that every time one of these plants would go out of business in Ohio, in Michigan, et cetera, no one wept for any of these people. No one did. A few people, we did a Breitbart, Donald Trump did. But there was never any wall-to-wall news cycle. There was never any mopey people with their head in their hands online leading the front pages of CNBC, like you're seeing today, because stock market's not having a good day as of now. But this is one of these things where just remember that the stock market's ticked down. Okay, I don't love it, but remember, we made the stock market our president in Trump's first administration, and it didn't help us. He wasn't able to win. He wasn't able to get all of his agenda through. And a lot of the problems that he wanted to fix persisted. They're still with us. So just think about that. I'll have a couple of reminders like that throughout the show today of things where there are disenfranchised groups of people. And the Wall Street class has been very much enfranchised. The journalism class, the sort of these people who are in the upper echelons of our society, people in the prestige jobs, they've been very well represented in this country. Who have not been well represented are a lot of the people who had towns that were run by a major manufacturing plant, where people got a lot of purpose, they got their jobs, they got benefits, they got retirement savings, all of that. None of that, those people were completely disenfranchised for the last decade, and now Trump's paying attention to them, and that makes a difference. I'm not completely saying this is a black and white issue. It's not. It's a tough issue. But the other way was not working, where we only elevate the elite and the people on the poorest level who you can buy their votes with handouts, as Democrats would do. So yeah, here's the details on China announcing Friday will impose a 34% tariff on U.S. goods. And it's first of all, we import way more from them. So this is the nature is they're in their heels now. So they're trying to fight aggressively. But it's a big mistake for them to do that because we rely more importing on them than the other way around. And that's part of where Trump has a lot of leverage. So is Xi Jinping going to hurt his own economy? Canada lost jobs last month for the first time in years. The stock market in Europe is down big. So these other countries, if they want to play tough and play hardball with Trump, they're going to suffer and their own people are going to tell them that they're suffering. Now, China is interesting because they got their Politburo there that runs everything. Xi Jinping's dictator for life. So it's not like he can't weather some storms too, because he'll still be in power. But there will be a political imperative in China where a lot of the lower classes, they don't buy into communism. I'm sorry, not just lower classes, younger people, they're not buying into communism. They're not having families. They don't buy into Xi Jinping's vision for the country. And so if they start suffering even more because he won't play nice with Trump, then it's not going to do great for them. So let's see. We got a long way to go. All right, so here's another one. Gavin Newsom asked world leaders to exempt California exports from retaliatory tariffs. So Newsom's a wine industry guy. Just also remember that. So California, of course, one of our big exports is wine. And he wants to have a special exemption for California when it comes to these tariffs. Let's hear him explain it.
Donald Trump's tariffs do not represent all Americans. And on behalf of 40 million Americans that live in the great state of California, the tentpole of the U.S. economy, 14% of the U.S. GDP, the fifth largest economy in the world, the dominant manufacturing state in America, our state of mind is around supporting stable trading relationships around the globe. And that's why today I've directed my administration to look at new opportunities to expand trade and to remind our trading partners around the globe that California remains a stable partner.
So here's the message here for Gavin Newsom and a lot of Democrats right now. These are the people who never cared about our tax rate. I'm a California resident. I pay six figures in taxes every year. It is miserable. My life is constantly feeding the California economy. I have a full-time nanny. That's not an entire write-off. You can only write off the taxes the nanny pays. I've got two expensive cars that I bought in the state. I've got with the huge sales tax. I've got a house and I've got property taxes that I pay here. I've got four children who are constantly needing stuff from the economy. My household is an economic engine, and still I am at one of the highest tax rates possible in this country. Not quite there, thank God, but I'm pretty close. Never cares. He does not care about the citizens and their tax rate. And now all of a sudden, because he feels like he's got a way to oppose Trump and to put himself in position to run for president, now he's out there. And all of a sudden, these same people who think the tariff is a tax, they never cared about our tax rate before. They only care about today because they can get Trump. So this is a guy who had a budget surplus and blew it. We now have in just a couple neighborhoods adjacent from me, we now have the highest sales tax in the country. He's never fighting on behalf of normal people who have families. In the state, it's always let's try to milk more money for them to put into bogus stuff, to put into programs for the Delta smelt, for trout runs, for our bloated education system that's not working, for climate stuff, not for fire preparedness. And then now all of a sudden he should get some sort of a exception. It just reveals a lot about these people. Peggy Noonan over at the Wall Street Journal, one of the semi-conservative but more globalist establishmentarian in a semi-conservative but more globalist opinion page, Wall Street Journal. This is the literal headline from yesterday. Canada, our friend, deserves better than this. Why does Canada deserve better than this? Canada was rolling us on trade. They're not helping us get oil out of the ground and into our country to help us. They're not being great partners under Trudeau. It just has not been the case. And so why are we so focused on Canada? Why aren't we focused on those same people who had their communities gutted by the globalism that left our border open and ruined our trade deals? So post NAFTA with the open border, so much of middle America was it was exported to China, our industrial base. And how did we do? We did badly. And there's no one in the Wall Street Journal standing up for these people. So this is why I would like for people to sit these things out, but they can't. So it's what they do. They gotta fight for themselves, and they'll point to the stock market. But when the stock market was booming under Trump last time, they didn't point to that and say that it was good for Trump. So that's part of the tricks that they do. You'll point to something and say, well, if it's good, well, Trump had nothing to do with it. And if it's bad, it was only Trump and Trump alone who did it. So keep that in mind and just be patient. Be patient. We got to hold the line here and give this thing a little chance to shake out, because I think we could be in good shape. Jerome Powell was speaking, and this sent the market even further downward. I want to play some of his, got a couple clips of him. Let's play this from Misty. This is the Federal Reserve Chairman.
Looking ahead, higher tariffs will be working their way through our economy and are likely to raise inflation in coming quarters. Reflecting this, both survey and market-based measures of near-term inflation expectations have moved up.
Okay, and then so he's saying the market-based inflation. So he thinks there's going to be more inflation, but it's a tariff. So of course there's going to be a little bit at first because some prices are going to go up short term. So that's part of it. That's baked in. But certain things, the price will go up a little bit. Sometimes, but it will not necessarily be as much as the benefit to our country, because we are going to reshore a lot of our economy here, which will ultimately benefit us. But naturally, if there's something that they put a tariff on, that is the prices will for a little bit go up a little bit. Like it's just true. So that's should not be huge news.
I understand the uncertainty that's weighing on people. You ask about a recession. We don't make a probability forecast of how likely it is for there to be a recession, but many outside forecasters do, and many of them have raised the likelihood, albeit from very low levels. It's not.
So what he's saying here is that we don't know what's going to happen, and the Fed's going to have to wait and see how it pans out. And he's trying not to criticize the trade policy. He's just trying to see what he says. And yet the market reacted very harshly to this because the media wanted it to. The media really freaked out about what Powell had to say and acted as though he had said something that was, completely out of line. No, he kind of said obvious stuff. Is that, of course, there's a little bit of inflation baked in with the tariff. And over time, we anticipate that could dissipate in a major way. But yeah, of course, some goods are going to be more expensive for a little bit. So that's inflationary. So sure, but overall, we think that there is going to be a much greater economic benefit, and we just got to be patient with it. We got to try this out. All right, let's see. Other stuff in the news. There's plenty of it. This is a New York Times headline. Ann Coulter flagged this, and she had a great caption. U.S. says deportation of Maryland man was an administrative error. She says, so far, this is my favorite headline in the Trump administration. This is the big deal that I'm trying to say, is that we have changed our default. Our default used to be that all 30 million illegal aliens, however many are here, can stay because we don't want to accidentally deport one person who was brought here as a child by their parents and doesn't have anywhere to be deported to. And that's a sad story. So thus we must keep 30 million people. So what we have to have the guts to do, and I think we're starting to understand this, is that occasionally someone who's nonviolent will get deported in this. There will all be people who are illegal. There's not going to be anyone who's an American citizen who's going to get deported without due process. But some of the people, maybe 5 of them accidentally get who are illegal aliens, broke the law. Maybe they missed some hearings, but maybe they accidentally end up in some sort of a foreign prison or something that Trump's cut a deal with. And if we decide that's too harsh, then we can grab those 5 and we can bring them back and we can have some sort of a process play out for the illegal aliens, maybe. But we're going to leave the 60 Tren de Aragua gang members that they went down there with. We're going to leave them there. And so we're going to default to we're deporting you if you're an illegal alien. And if there's some exception, we will maybe figure out the exception or maybe not. What we've done in the past is we allowed for Tren de Aragua, MS-13, et cetera, for the last 30 years to exist in our country because we were afraid of deporting too many of the sob stories that would play out on MSNBC. We've now reversed it. And again, if we hold the line, this is the right move. It's exactly the right move, and we need to stick with it. All right, another right move. This is according to the National Pulse. Secretary Hegseth heads to Panama for security talks. Another one, we got to keep moving with flooding the zone. We've got to keep flooding the zone with all of Trump's agenda because this makes it harder for the media to push back. It makes it harder for the courts to do a lot of injunctions. The injunctions are coming in so fast. It's really hard to beat the lawfare machine. It just is. So it'll be a huge topic of conversation all year. I guarantee it. Lawfare machine is so efficient, but it is other parts of his agenda, taking that Panama port back from China. There's a lot of speculation that BlackRock might not be able to pull off the sale from those Hong Kong connected companies. We need to get that back. It is the right thing to do. It is the right thing for our security, for global trade, for justice, because we should never have lost it to begin with. So all of that's pretty good. And glad to see that's happening. So I hope that's true. Trump's backed Anna Paulina Luna on her proxy voting battle with Speaker Johnson. So here's the thing I would like him. Feel free to email me this, aloha@alexmarlow.com, and email this to me like I'm one of the dumbest group, like I'm in the dumbest group of Americans, liberal arts educated people. So people got a college degree in liberal arts. Okay. Explain to me why we can't say that proxy voting is unconstitutional, and why Speaker Johnson didn't need to tie the entire week's agenda to defeating Anna Paulina Luna's resolution. It feels like a unnecessary move by Johnson. Maybe I'm missing something. I would like, if those of you are paying closer attention than I am even, talk to a lot of people. I don't get it. I don't know why he had to do that. I don't understand it. Please try to explain to me, because it seems like one where the Constitution says you can't do the proxy voting, let that work itself out, and then you pass the rest of the agenda because of the most important capital that you have as an executive branch is time. And we don't want to waste time because, again, the flood the zone mentality is working. We want to have more Trump agenda going through, making it difficult for Democrats to block it and to message against it from a media perspective. Okay, other things going on Breitbart News today. McKinsey CEO attends a Chinese Communist Party-backed conference featuring high-ranking CCP officials. We're going to have to drill more once the political agenda dies down a little bit. Well, we got to drill more into the Chinese capture of American institutions. McKinsey and Company, with the biggest consultants in the world, they were ones that were heavily involved in gutting a lot of these towns, the mergers and acquisitions, the strategic layoffs, all that stuff that was done. That was a part of the globalization of the world that ended up rooting out a lot of American culture and a lot of our cities. And, you know, they get deep ties to China because this is their CEO, Bob Sternfels, lawmakers have looked into his firm's management of Chinese military and Chinese development forum ties. And now he has been, I guess, hobnobbing a lot with the CCP top Communist Party officials. So we just need to figure out what these guys are doing. And I know they're ruthless capitalists. They're just here to make money, all that stuff. But it is not our job as the American people to make life easy for them to help the enemy. And that is something that is worthy of some time. And we'll spend some more time. All right. So some light good news, but I don't know how good it is. And again, another one, I'll get your take, aloha@alexmarlow.com. Klaus Schwab, so the founder of the World Economic Forum, he's apparently starting his efforts to depart from the WEF. So the WEF is the ultimate globalist organization where they bring all these globalists and world leaders, et cetera, to the ski resorts. They're very expensive. They all fly there in private planes, and they talk about how climate change is going to kill us all. And he's one of the most nefarious individuals in the world. I did a big speech on the Great Reset, which is largely tied to him, that you can find online. That's one of my favorite speeches I ever gave. It was at a Turning Point event about a year and a half ago or so. So if you're curious for more, I go into Schwab and his background quite a bit. But he's very, very nefarious influence on the planet. And he's got enough money and clout and connections and celebrity connections where he is able to co-opt a lot of smart, young, not necessarily MAGA conservatives, but certainly centrist conservatives and people who we would prefer to have on our team in a perfect world. And so a bad guy, but you know, him stepping down, he's 87. It doesn't mean much to me because much like George Soros, I'm completely confident that he's going to pass his globalist economic forum to other bad guys. So he has a secret blueprint, by the way, of the WEF to control every aspect of your life. We had a big story from Seamus Brunner on this from his book, Control Oligarchs, which I should have Seamus on. He's a great researcher, works for Peter Schweitzer. But, we've done a lot of deep dives on him. But his top advisor is this guy, Yuval Noah Harari, who's a mega best-selling author, and he's sort of a futurist and clearly a super bright guy, but has some of the most evil ideas on the planet. He says we don't need the vast majority of the population in today's world. So he's one of these guys who thinks we have way too many people, which is that is conversation number one that ends in mass genocide if you have enough of these conversations. So that's the guy who's at Schwab's right hand, and he's only 49 years old, so he can do this another 30, 40 years if he wanted to. So I don't know if he'll get the keys to the kingdom, but he probably will. And it's just very creepy. He's even creepier than Schwab, in my opinion. He says humans are going to need to relearn how to see and walk because we're in a virtual reality future. So he says this stuff, it gets a lot of attention, and then he sells books, but he says it in a way that's fairly convincing, and that disturbs me because a lot of people are going to buy into that, and it is it is going to lead us in a very, very bad place if we continue to have any ties to the World Economic Forum. So just because Schwab's going to go, it's great, but he's going to be replaced by someone just as bad, if not worse. All right. Other items that I want to, should I bring up the fencing stuff? Like the fencing stuff's the hottest thing online. USA Fencing has females who are, I guess, not competing against men. This is terrific, but I also, I want to see the men just continue to beat the women really badly now. I'm now an accelerationist is the expression on this. So I'm an accelerationist in terms of I really think we need to get all the men we need to have university and just get a bunch of ringers, stack the deck. Basketball seems like the way to go, and have all men just score 150 points a game and beat all the women, win a championship. And I think that will end this. I think that will end the trans nonsense. But I credit there's one woman in particular who's been out in the news who's been very brave, standing up to refusing to fight men in fencing. And apparently the whole fencing establishment is very pro-trans. So just odd stuff. Russell Brand charged in the UK with rape and sexual assault. This is a really interesting one because Russell Brand is now, he's mostly on Rumble, comedian, pops up on conservative platforms, seems like he's found Jesus Christ and is really pretty good at doing some of the YouTube content creator stuff from a semi-conservative Christian perspective. And he's getting charged with assault by 4 women between 1999 and 2005 when he was a top comic and movie star. And he's being accused of rape and sexual assault. This is a really interesting one because if you hear Brand talk about his past, he was a drug addict and he was a sex addict, and he's probably not used to getting told no by anyone. I've only met him. I actually never met him, but we were in the same room once because we were doing simultaneous TV hits at a studio in LA one time. And he seemed completely insane. And he's reinvented himself, I think, to some degree since then. But there's no statute of limitations in the UK. So if he did these things, then he could end up going to jail. He's beat some of them in the past though. So I'm sure he'll fight it, but I'm interested here because if he is a rapist, then he's going to get held to account probably. But it is noteworthy that these things are only coming up because of his conversion to conservatism and Christianity. I guarantee you that this stuff would not have been just resurfacing after 20 to 25 years, 27, 28 years, aside from that he is now a pretty potent voice reaching middle to younger aged conservative people with conservative and Christian values now. So that is why they're going after him. But if he's guilty and they got him, then it's going to be, they're going to get him. So really interesting. And I'm going to try to keep an eye on that for all of you at Breitbart, as always, try to report on all that stuff. I will tell you that I guess I'm going long, so maybe I'll save this for Monday, but I'm supposed to be on Laura Ingraham tonight. And the topic is the dumbest thing the liberals have said this week. And I'll tease this for Monday's show, but I did some research and I got to tell you, I found some absolute bangers of some of the crazy things that the state senator Lindsey Williams suggesting female athletes and males are interchangeable. Colorado Democrats saying a birth is more expensive than abortion, arguing that we need to have abortions because they're cheaper than having babies. I've got some hot takes in this. I'll save them for Monday. Let's save them for Monday's show. Why not? I think it's pretty good. But anyway, the just hold the line, the tariffs. It's going to slow growth a little bit short term, but you couple it with a big tax cut, deregulation, this economy is going to be ripping, and we're going to be happy to see it. All right, that's today's show. Before we get into our guest, you guys want to hear about this. I've been talking about Spectrum. This is one of the top issues going on Capitol Hill, and I do want to have some of this wonkier content for you guys who get to know really what's happening, what they're debating in Washington, because you can't trust the filter on the X algorithm or even your favorite podcast host 100%. Sometimes you got to hear from the people who are really getting their hands dirty. So let's do that, and let's do it right now. All right. So for the last few days on the show, you've heard me talk a little bit about Spectrum. And I'm not talking about the cable company that some of you guys have. I'm talking about those airwaves floating through the air that power a lot of the technology and a lot of the media that you consume. And it's something that is not discussed that much outside of Washington until I think it's about to start happening. But in Washington, there's a very hot topic. I was just pointing out that a couple of DC trips ago, I think I had like 6 or 7 or 8 meetings all on Spectrum. People are really interested in this because a lot of people see a potential gold rush coming for the opportunity to have a Spectrum auction. And someone who's very knowledgeable about this, a new sponsor to the show, the Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association, their senior vice president, Kelly Cole, is with me today. Kelly, it's really nice to talk to you about this pretty interesting topic. But I want to start from, can you walk us through what Spectrum is and the differences between licensed and unlicensed first? I think this is kind of where this starts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, I spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, and sometimes when I say the word Spectrum, I literally see eyes like glaze over.
Yeah.
But it actually really is an incredibly important conversation. There's two kinds of Spectrum, basically licensed and unlicensed. If you use a cellular phone, and I think just about everybody in America does, you're using licensed Spectrum. That basically means the airwaves that are being used to travel, whether it's phone or data, is owned by or controlled by the carrier. So it's not interrupted, it's not interfered with. You get a clean signal and it shouldn't drop, right? It's like owning a home. You can do whatever you want to it. You can improve it, increase it, expand on it, do whatever you want. Unlicensed spectrum is the spectrum that's used for Wi-Fi. It's generally used by cable companies around the country. Licensed is like a public park. Basically, you can sit down and have a picnic, but there may be somebody playing football right next to you. So there's no interference protections. They actually do not need to go to auction to get that spectrum. If you're buying licensed spectrum, you have to go to an auction, buy that spectrum, and that money goes back to the federal treasury.
Okay, so why does your position is that you think that President Trump should have a spectrum auction? This is a popular position. Give it to me in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, if you use a cellular phone in this country, like I said, I think there's 331 million Americans, and that's there's more phones in this country than there are Americans at this point. If you use it, if you want to make a 911 call, if you're outside walking around and you want to listen to your podcast, for example, you're going to need access to licensed spectrum. That's the only way that you're going to get a sort of a clean signal to do the things that you want to do in your everyday life. So, the way people are consuming, particularly new media, shows like yours, non-traditional media, people are consuming it on their cell phones. And we want to make sure nothing changes to allow Americans to be able to access the shows they want on the platform they want. And the platform they want it on is a cellular phone.
So the government sits on a lot of spectrum. How much is the U.S. government sitting on, and what would an auction look like?
So auctions have been in existence since 1993, and auctions have raised $233 billion to date. We think the next auction, because licensed spectrum is so scarce, it's incredibly valuable. We believe companies like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, they will go to auction and spend anywhere between $100 and $200 billion because they need spectrum so desperately right now. And I think the reason for that is something we saw from a report that just came out from Accenture, which basically says without more spectrum for your wireless phones, you're going to see more buffering, longer wait times, more dropped connections. I mean, we're running out of spectrum because everybody uses these devices so much. So we really need additional auctions. And that's something we're pushing the White House on, and we're pushing Congress on right now.
So one thing that is, I think, going to be compelling to this audience, because a lot of this audience, obviously, consumes new media, alternative media.
Yeah.
A lot of the allocated spectrum right now has gone to some of these major companies that are seen as more establishment in this regard, and they've just always had it because the government let them have it decades ago. Can you give us a little bit of this history?
Yeah, I mean, big cable, legacy media, I mean, they've
Yeah.
had access to spectrum for a long time, and they really do a very good job of filtering the information that you get from those outlets, whether it's cable news or newspapers. I mean, it's interesting. We've seen this huge race in the last few years. I mean, people are cutting the cord, right? People are starting to go digital. Newspapers are slashing their newsrooms, and most cable news ratings are going down the toilet. So it's been really interesting to see the migration to new media and shows like yours. And that's why it's so important to make sure these wireless devices have the spectrum, the licensed spectrum that they need, because that's how your audience and a lot of audiences, frankly, on the right of center side, that's how they're accessing this content. And we don't want big cable, as an example, to control your access to that new information, which everybody is starting to consume.
Okay, so let's speak specifically to my audience. It obviously goes broader than that, I think, and,
Yep.
and I've got some broader questions. But let's think about the people at this point is resonating with them. They're podcast listeners. They like the idea of alternative media. They don't like the idea of big cable having a monopoly. Then what does the spectrum auction? How could it benefit? How does it work so that eventually it benefits shows like mine and other shows you guys might be featured on?
Yep, absolutely. Well, like I said, most consumers are accessing your content and content like yours on their mobile phone. So, in order for these mobile phones to work, the oxygen or the fuel that they use to make them work is spectrum. And so, what happens is a company goes to an FCC auction, they bid on that spectrum and spend billions and billions of dollars. We think, like I said, the next auction could generate between 100 and 200 billion dollars. And without that spectrum, these phones will not work the way consumers expect them to work. And again, from our perspective, we believe big cable really wants to control the way you access information. And by controlling our access to spectrum, that's how they get at making sure shows like yours, frankly, don't get the audience they deserve and they should get.
Okay, so who's championing your side in Washington right now?
So right now, Senator Ted Cruz is a huge champion. This guy has been on the case on this issue for quite some time. I give him a lot of credit for sort of seeing the issue years ago. He's been sounding the alarm that we need to address this issue. He's talked to President Trump. He's introduced a great bill called the Spectrum Pipeline Act, which is designed to make sure you can access, shows like yours with a wireless phone. Even President Trump, in his first term, actually took steps to make more licensed spectrum available. So we've been working really closely with the White House. I think President Trump understands this issue. And again, the benefit is you can raise a whole lot of money to pay for a whole lot of spending, which we're starting to see this reconciliation process come together. If we want tax cuts, we got to pay for those. And this is a way that we can help pay for a lot of the spending that the DC is talking about doing.
That's interesting. If you guys are interested in more information, endthecableopoly.org, endthecableopoly, OPOLY at the end there, .org for more. The call to action here is if you're convinced, you can call your congressman, your senator, and you can direct them to try to encourage President Trump to sell more spectrum. That I think where we're going for here from Kelly's vantage point. And I want to ask about, let's say, how the auction works. So the auction takes place. Are you concerned that some of the wealthiest corporations in the world are just going to gobble it all up? And will there be hoarding? Will there be? What is the access really going to be like for? Is there a way to do it so that there's small, medium-sized businesses can get it, or do you think it's just going to go for the biggest companies in the world are just going to gobble it all up?
No, and that's a great question because we obviously want to make sure everybody's got an opportunity to utilize this, and it really is a government asset at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So anybody can bid. And actually, the way it works in practice is you buy a license to a geographic area. So if you are a smaller, maybe mid-sized cellular company and you serve a small part of the United States, you can bid on those licenses. The big sort of nationwide carriers, they're going to bid on nationwide licenses. So everybody's got an opportunity to bid on these licenses, which is, it's good for the economy.
So what if the one of the objections I've seen is that maybe the government should keep this because maybe they could use it for defense, they could use it for
Yeah.
military, and they like the idea of having it be something that is just stays as a public good. What's the logic there, and why do you guys disagree?
Yeah, it's a great question too. The Pentagon sits on an enormous amount of spectrum. And, way back in like the 1930s, when there wasn't really a huge demand for spectrum, the government gave out licenses and the Pentagon got a huge amount of spectrum. We don't believe they utilize that spectrum as efficiently as they probably could. I mean, this coming from an agency that spends $10,000 on a toilet seat. So we want to make sure, and I think there's a real push to make sure the Pentagon is using what is a very valuable, scarce resource as efficiently as possible. So the great thing is sometimes, when you sell these spectrum licenses, you can take some of those proceeds and reinvest them back into the government. So we would tell the Pentagon, look, we can generate revenue to help move you or help it make your systems more efficient, which frankly is good for the Pentagon and it's good for the economy because you're freeing up spectrum in the private marketplace that helps consumers at the end of the day. So it's been really interesting. We were having some conversations with the Joint Chiefs Chair, Mark Milley, during the Biden administration, and he just absolutely refused to sit down and have these conversations about how do we repurpose some of this Pentagon airwaves? How do we find ways to use it more efficiently? And I think finally we've got, Pete Hegseth there and certainly Donald Trump and the whole Doge effort, which is all built
Sure.
around how do we make government work more efficiently. And I think this is a great example of how we can encourage the government to be more efficient with an incredibly valuable resource.
I think you found a good talking point there because if Mark Milley's on the other side, I think that's
Yeah,
I
right.
think
Incredibly
that's going to
frustrating.
perk people's ears up. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So I had one I was thinking about, which is AI. We're very future focused at Breitbart. I'm looking down the
Yep.
field, and I'm curious how spectrum is going to impact our ability to compete in AI, build out telecommunication.
Yeah.
Networks and maybe even consider China's got a completely different. I don't mean to ask a two-part question, but I guess I am. But China's got they're moving much more quickly on this stuff than we
Yep.
are. Can you kind of combine those?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say at the offset, China has by 2027 will have made 4 times more 5G spectrum available than the United States, which has huge implications for us as a global leader in the wireless space, as well as their goal at the end of the day is to make sure the rest of the world relies on their next gen technology. So as a country, we need to stay competitive with China in the spectrum space. That being said, they're a communist surveillance state at the end of the day. So we need to do everything we can to make sure the United States is the organization or the country leading the world and making sure sort of we're the beacon of light that people are following when it comes to spectrum.
Okay, so you've got if licensing spectrum, is it more effective for achieving AI dominance, do you think, or do you think it's better to keep it as that public utility sort of
Yeah.
resource and leave it with the Pentagon? Because that seems to be a real fundamental question for my audience.
Yeah, it's interesting right now, the whole conversation around energy and the needs for energy as it relates to AI. And there's a lot happening on Capitol Hill right now and inside the White House to make sure we have the resources to make sure we can keep up on the AI side, right? And I think there's a lot of good things happening on the energy side. But once you have the energy, and I think we'll get there, once you have the energy to ensure we can power all of that AI, what is that AI going to run on, right? What are the networks that AI is going to need to be really helpful to this country? And you're going to need really robust wireless networks because those networks are going to be the ones carrying all of that AI data, which is why, again, it's so important. We're already seeing demand for wireless data doubling every other year. I mean, we're just seeing huge growth in wireless
Right.
data. And think
Well,
of what
that's
AI
why I brought
can
up the
do on
AI
top
because
of that.
Yeah, that's the most data and energy we're going to ever expend ever.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
if we don't have the networks to make sure that AI can be disseminated, that's a bottleneck, right? Like that's going to be a huge problem. So we need to make sure we've got the network infrastructure there to make sure whatever AI needs this country has, what the wireless networks can withstand that and handle it.
So you guys frame it in your literature as a looming crisis. Oh, what does the crisis look like to you?
Well, as I mentioned, Accenture just did this paper. They're basically arguing that we won't be able to meet a quarter of the peak demand of data traffic by 2027. That's 2 years away, right? So again, what does that mean? Buffering, loading times, dropped connections. And I would argue every American should be able to get the media that they want from the platform they want. We say this over and over. And I think increasingly for outlets like yours, new media outlets, people are consuming that information on mobile phones. And so we need to make sure that we've got the spectrum equation right to make sure we can meet the moment. And right now we can't. And it's about 2 years away that we're going to start to feel that, and consumers are going to start to feel that every day.
So how do we feel that? Is that in price hikes or is it in slower service or limited
Slower
services?
service. Yep,
Oh, interesting.
slower service. And, it
Wow.
could take 25 times or 25% longer for somebody to download your show in just 2 years if they're using that capacity at peak times. We're going to see degradation to the networks, and we want to do everything we can to prevent that.
Okay, and then China is on pace to, I think, quadruple the amount of spectrum that we have in a couple of years. What are the stakes of that? So it's if they have that much more, what are they doing with it that we're not doing?
Well, obviously, China is a command and control environment, right? Like they can take whatever spectrum they want, whenever they want, and give it to their national carriers, give it to their defense. They can use it however they like. So obviously, that's a challenge. In a democracy, we do things a little more fair. We go to auction and we pay for it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, China has taken on, and we all know sort of what the goals of China are. They've taken on this goal of infiltrating and controlling worldwide communications networks. I mean, they've taken the Huawei, that infrastructure, and they've exported it around the globe. And now we're in a position where we're trying to pull it out of telecommunications networks globally, and frankly, here in the United States. So we don't want to end up in a position like we did with Huawei, where we kind of ignored it for a little too long. It got way out of control, and now we're trying to yank it out of telecommunications networks. We don't want to end up in a situation where China gets so far ahead of us in 5G and potentially 6G because we didn't get the spectrum equation right. And we're really on the sort of precipice of allowing China to just run away with the 5G conversation. The good news is I think President Trump gets this. As I mentioned, in his first term, he made spectrum available. We know there's a lot of conversations happening inside the White House about how do we do that again. They get the threat and they're working to address it. But we've got some, formidable folks who are trying to prevent the wireless phones from getting access to more spectrum.
So critics kind of frame this as a potential national security threat if there's more spectrum released. How do you retort to that?
Yeah, it's funny. When Senator Cruz introduced his bill, he said there's going to be people out there that spread misinformation. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Just last week, actually, Senator Cruz sent a letter to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and asked her to take a look at claims that he's certainly read about that China and some U.S. groups are actually trying to limit spectrum through a misinformation campaign. And so that's, again, I actually saw some ads today on Fox Business sort of claiming that we were going to harm national security by making more spectrum available for your cell phones, which is just ridiculous. It's just absolutely not true.
Okay, so do you believe that the spectrum auction is the America First position?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think not just from a sort of freedom of speech perspective. Again, we want to make sure everybody can access, that those new media platforms wherever they are. We've just seen massive changes in the way people consume media. But I think not just from a First Amendment perspective, but from a national security perspective, if we really fall behind China, when it comes to 5G. What that means is we have a weaker economy, and you cannot have a strong national defense without having a strong national economy. And wireless is such a huge part of what drives our U.S. economy. I mean, 1.5 million jobs attributable to 5G, 400 billion in GDP. I mean, it's part of how we run our companies, our commerce, our lives in this country, and we do not want to fall behind China.
Kelly Cole, Cellular Telecommunications Industry Association. You guys got a new boss over there. I got to ask you about it. My last question: Ajit Pai, one of the coolest guys in Washington.
Oh my
that's
God.
That's a good get for you guys.
It's a great get. Honestly, we couldn't have done better. Ajit, his first day was Tuesday, so he's been here all of 3 days.
Wow.
But he is frankly a rock star in the telecommunications circles. He's done a lot for this country. He's been a huge champion of wireless since his first days over at the Federal Communications Commission, and we are absolutely thrilled he is here at CTIA. We were very lucky to get him.
Well, this has been super informative, and we're so appreciative of your support for the show. What can the audience do if they want to get involved and learn more?
Thank you. Cableopoly.org is our main website. We have a coalition pulled together to make sure, as I mentioned, that you all who rely on your wireless phones have the spectrum you need to make sure they continue to work the way you expect them to work. So call your member of Congress, call your senator, thank Senator Ted Cruz and President Trump for making sure your phones continue to work the way they need to with more spectrum.
And thecableopoly.org. Kelly, this is really cool. Let's do this again.
Thank you so much.